ladies and gentlemen, we're now standing in St Anne's Square, and the church directly in front of you is St Anne's Church. This area is the first part of Manchester that was actually planned in terms of layout. The whole area, St Anne's Square, St Anne's Church and King Street we just passed through, was actually designed and planned in the early 1800s. The finance for this planning came from a local lady, Lady Anne Bland. Lady Anne was part of the Moseley family, and the Mosleys were one of the big landowning families in the area. She married a guy called Lord Bland, who was pretty well a ne'er-do-well, not a very good husband. The only saving grace that he had was he died pretty early on, left with quite a lot of money to spend. The church was designed in a Georgian classical style, and if you have a look, Zoe, you can see that in terms of the simple windows, the triangular formation over the door, and the very simple columns and the equally sized windows. So that's how we know it's a very Georgian classical style building. The building was designed by an architect called John Barker, and John Barker was a pupil of Sir Christopher Wren, that some of you might know. He redesigned London after the Great Fire, and he designed St Paul's Church, for example. So for quite a long time we actually thought this building was designed by Christopher Wren, but actually it wasn't. It was one of his pupils. Another interesting fact about the church is the tower. The tower actually is the centre of Manchester as far as map making is concerned. So for any maps that you look at, or any distance signposts that you see, this is actually the centre of Manchester even today. So when you're looking at your A to Z, or you're looking at road signs, it's 9 miles to Altrincham, this is where they're measuring it from, although obviously for commercial purposes it no longer is. Lady Anne Bland is an interesting character herself. She was a supporter of the Hanoverian Georgian kings, so she supported the current king at the time. Now she didn't like the Stuart pretenders, as you probably know. The Stuarts were deposed from the throne and went across the water. So we had Bonnie Prince Charlie, who was the young pretender, and she didn't support him, she supported George and the Georgian kings. The Collegiate Church, which is that way in the medieval part of Manchester, supported the Stuarts. So Lady Anne Bland wasn't very happy to go and worship there politically. So she decided to build this church to give the Georgian supporters somewhere to come and worship. So there was obviously a split between the Collegiate Church and what they called the Low Church here at St Anne. So very pared down services, High Church and the Collegiate Church, which meant it kept some of the Catholic pomp and circumstance in terms of the actual services. This was still a very fashionable church, however. To get a pew at this church, you would pay £100 a year, which is a huge sum of money. And it was said that it was so fashionable, became so fashionable, that people would go to the Collegiate Church in the morning, then come down here to be seen in the afternoon. Okay, so if you were the middle class, you wanted to be seen here in St Anne's. Lady Anne Bland also showed that she was a Hanoverian and Georgian supporter in her clothing. She was known to wear the colours of the Orange men, who were associated with the Georgian kings, and she would wear orange ribbons in her hair and on her clothing, and she'd have the ladies in waiting wear the same, and they would dance around the square supposedly. She had an arch rival called Lady Drake, who'd come down in her carriage, and she'd be in the Stuart plaid, and she'd come down, so it'd be a battle of the dresses, and they'd all be dancing around in the square trying to sort of show off to one another. The other thing you might not know about this square is that if we go back a bit further in time, in terms of the medieval period, this area was actually called Akersfield, and it was the site of one of the main medieval markets in Manchester in September, 3-day market. And at that time, in the medieval period, you couldn't keep your cattle over the winter because you had no other food. You couldn't buy in feed. You could barely feed your family. So in September, you would bring your cattle and your sheep and any other livestock you wanted to sell into the square to sell it in the winter, keep the money to feed your family over the cold period, and then you come and buy your sheep, cows, etc. again in the spring. There was a weird ritual that went on with that market. When you brought the first animal into the market, it would be pelted with acorns and beaten with twigs. I don't exactly know why, we were just tenderising the meat, I don't know, but that's what they did in terms of the ritual. Okay, I think we're going to move on now. I'm not sure who's going to be picking up. Excuse me guys, which way are we going? Right, we're moving along to the Royal Exchange now, please, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.